Your focus is like you've got the North Star in your sights all the time, whether it's fitness or yo-yos and all this magical stuff that you can do.
I'm a second-year Doctor of Physical Therapy program.
What age would that make you when you graduate?
I'll be briefly 24.
They will eat nothing but chicken and broccoli for weeks, and they step on the scale, it reads the same. What would be your explanation for something like that?
It's not something that's super heavily talked about. It's something called metabolic syndrome. There is a consistent thing that goes on in the body where if you don't use it, you lose it.
For somebody that's struggling to gain weight or gain strength, what would you advise them to do?
There's the principle of progressive overload. That is probably, if you can sum it down to one thing, that is the most important. The other biggest thing I would say is...
Welcome to Growth Mindset Mastery, where our mission is to make your next challenge into the opportunity that changes everything. All right, my doppelganger friend is here. I'll let you talk a little bit about yourself in a minute. Who are you, and what are you working on right now, and what did it take for you to get here?
Okay, that's a lot to answer all at once, but I'll do my best.
Could have broke it up.
Okay. So my name is Josh. I'm your brother, obviously. I'm your younger brother. I'm currently 22. I'm a second-year Doctor of Physical Therapy program at Texas Tech. And it's been a long journey to get to this point, and it's definitely not a place that I thought I'd ever be. I struggled a lot academically as I was going through undergrad and high school, but I don't know. I've gotten through a lot to get to where I am with that currently. So
I was hoping you were going to say that you were cloned in a lab. We switched cabins at camp one year. It was great. And we look a little bit more different now. But yes, second year physical therapy, which is insane. And how old did you say you were?
I'm currently 22.
All right. So what age would that make you when you graduate?
I'll be briefly 24. And then about a couple months after I graduate, I will be 25.
Which is pretty insane. I mean, how many 24-year-old doctors do you know?
Not many, although there is one guy in my program younger than me, but he's our class president, so what do you expect?
Good for him. We'll be interviewing that guy next week. But for now...
I think he'd do it.
Well, give me a number. Anyway, no.
We can talk later.
You mentioned struggling academically. What was the hardest part getting to this point? Because there's a million people that would love to be in your shoes to have so much academic accomplishment. What was the hardest thing for you to get to where you are academically?
There's a lot of obstacles I can name, but naming the easiest, the biggest one is definitely easy for me. So I have ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which that's a whole subject in itself, but that's something that I didn't know that I had until I believe a senior in high school. And I had struggled a long time with focusing on anything academic. I think everybody tends to struggle with motivation and attention a lot, but this was to the point where I would be trying so hard to study for something, and I would want so badly to study for it, but I just could not get myself to do it, and it felt like I was lazy, and it felt like it was my fault. And because ADHD isn't something that's super well understood, a lot of people that I knew also kind of seemed to think it was also my fault, which definitely wasn't a good feeling, and it definitely didn't help me do any better academically. So I had a lot of self-doubt going into college and going into the career path that I'm on currently, and that's why I really didn't think that I would ever get to where I am, especially knowing how competitive physical therapy school is. I thought if I struggle this much during high school, how am I ever going to make it in college? And in college, I thought if I struggle this much now, how am I ever going to make it when I'm taking twice as many credit hours and much harder courses in grad school, even if I somehow manage to get in? And yeah, that was a long and difficult journey. And I remember during college, everybody always used to say, make good use of these years because it's the best time of your life. And I always used to get so angry when I heard that, because I was like, this is the worst years of my life, without a doubt. I'm not enjoying myself. These classes are pointless. I'm not doing well, and I feel bad about procrastinating all the time.
If you want to have fun in college, you cannot pick the hardest major. Or you can pick the hardest major and just get D's and C's. But, if you want to get to where you are, then there's sacrifices to be made, and that's an excellent point. But the thing that you said was so good is every step of the way it felt like the next step was impossible. And that's one of the things that makes me think that smarts are so overrated. because you can be the smartest guy in the room, but if you don't have what it takes to take the next step, then it's not going to get you anywhere. And then you have a lot of information, you've got so much ability, but if you can't put that into action, then maybe no one will even realize. And some people that get to the top maybe have us thinking that they're smarter than they actually are. And if you ask them, they tell you, actually, I feel pretty average. But it's just, I mean, there's so much that grit can do. And I'm very proud to see where you are. But I wanted to ask you, when you're in those places where you feel like the next phase is impossible, what kept you going? Like, why didn't you just quit?
To be perfectly honest, the first thing that jumps into my mind is the people who wouldn't let me quit. My mom, my dad, my family, my girlfriend at the time, currently my wife. People, like, I can definitely say without the people who I've had in my life pushing me to keep going, I would never have made it anywhere. Also my faith. I don't think I could have ever made it without my faith. But I don't know. I think a big part of it was not just that people were telling me that I was capable. I never felt capable, but people saw something in me that made them think I was capable, I guess. But I did know for sure that I was smart all through school, even though I felt dumb, because I knew I was putting in very, very little work time-wise into what I was doing because I had so much trouble focusing. So the fact that I was able to accomplish anything at all meant that I had to be at least somewhat smart. So I felt because of that, and because of the people who were encouraging me, and because of all the resources that I had, thinking about how accomplished people around me, the people that I met who came from so much less, from so little support to accomplish what they did. With all the resources that I had, I just kind of felt that I had a responsibility to actually carry out the path that I was on and at least give it my all. I felt like if I give it my all and I fail, that's okay. I can be okay with that. But if I give up when nobody in my life gave up on me, that's just not something I feel okay with.
Yeah. I think I've met some of those people that seem to come from a lot less. I knew a guy that was so hardworking. I want to figure out how to phrase this so it does justice to him. He hadn't been blessed with maybe nearly as much smarts as some of the people in the program, but he pulled off a B in organic chemistry. This guy was just burning the midnight oil every day. When he took a break, it was to do artwork that was an assignment or something like that. And I was like, you're going to kill yourself. But he was so determined. And he ended up graduating with a decent GPA. I mean, it was way higher than some of the people that were smarter than him. Grit is so powerful. And I 100% believe you can trade time for skill in certain situations. So what would you say to somebody that they don't feel qualified, they don't feel capable? What would you encourage them to do if they didn't have nearly as much support as you did?
One thing I would say is that for someone who doesn't feel capable, if you don't feel capable, there is a very, very good chance that you're underestimating yourself. By how much, that's a more difficult question. But people who don't believe that they're capable really tend to underestimate the ability that they have. One of my favorite quotes that one of my professors told me as we were going into practicals, he told me about something that a professor told him when he was in PT school, and he said, people a lot dumber than you have made it through this program. And whoever you are, that's kind of always the truth. No matter what you feel like you're incapable about, someone who has less than what you do has always done it. I think the biggest thing is you have to be decided on what you want to do, and you have to be accepting of what it's going to take to get you there. If you're not decided, it doesn't matter what you're doing, it's going to be really difficult to stay motivated in what you're doing. So you have to figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and you need to be committed to it. And it doesn't take it being the perfect thing for you to be totally committed to what you're doing. It just takes accepting that that's what you want to do.
That sounds so spot on. And that's something that's been fascinating to me lately. If you just keep going in the same direction, it doesn't always matter how fast, but this idea of compound interest, I think it applies to skill along with things like money. But some of the most successful people in the world, like, I mean, like they say some of these billionaires would be worth a lot more if they had just held all their stock. And I wonder if, or they say people that get lost in the forest, most of the time, the reason they stay lost is because instead of going in one direction until they find their way out, they go in one direction for 5 minutes and then they turn around. I don't think this is the way out, and they can keep doing that over and over and over again. And that's one thing I see in you is your focus is like you've got the North Star in your sights all the time, whether it's with fitness or yo-yos and all this magical stuff that you can do. Check out his Instagram, guys. The way that you do things has such an intentionality to it. Once you find something that you have a passion for, you pursue it, and you're ready to die on that hill. If more of us could do that, I struggle with this a little bit because I tend to be the jack of all trades, master of none, but that's one thing that I've learned from you is if you can stay focused on one thing for long enough, you get to a level of mastery where it's really hard for anyone to come in and be as good as you at that one thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple phrase, but I definitely subscribe to the idea that if something is worth doing, it's worth doing right. It's worth being invested in something. If you're investing in it a little bit, you might as well actually invest in it a lot.
And that's the great thing about community is when we've got more people that know how to do other things that we don't know, we have an opportunity to get really good at that one thing. And then I need you and I need you because you're experts at those things. But if we all work together as a team, we're so much more effective than me trying to do everything myself. But I wanted to ask you on that topic of lifting weights. How much time do you have to do things like exercise while you're in physical therapy school? And how much time do you spend doing coursework or anything related to, I absolutely have to do this or I'm going to get kicked out of school?
So first thing you said was how much time do you have to like exercise during physical therapy school? You have as much time as you're willing to put into it. How much time do I put into it? Not as much as I should, because physical therapy school is a balancing act. They want to know that you're able to balance the heavy course load with life, because that's something that's going to translate to your ability to be a good professional. But don't sacrifice your life outside of PT school to do as well as possible in PT school. It's a balancing act and not one that I'm the greatest at, but it's definitely doable. The other thing is, though, that I do really enjoy the coursework a lot. It's very stark contrast from undergrad, where I was constantly stressed, constantly procrastinating. In PT school, I don't feel like I'm stressed. I rarely get stressed. Only time I do is like before practical because of the high stakes. But other than that, I basically study because I enjoy the grind. I enjoy learning stuff that this is where my motivation comes from now. This is why I'm motivated now as opposed to undergrad, where I was not motivated, because I feel like I'm learning things that actually are contributing to where I want to get, and that's exciting. If it's moving you forward instead of distracting you from what you want to achieve, that's motivation. And that's why I enjoy doing so much coursework and why I study from 6 a.m. to midnight, multiple days.
Yeah. The classic lumberjack scenario where you pay him all day to hit a post with no axe head, but you pay him twice as much. And the next day he wants to go back to chopping trees for half the amount, because we do things for two different reasons, I mean external and internal factors, but when we get the satisfaction of doing something that seems meaningful, it can be a lot more powerful than a number crunching job or something that doesn't feel like it has any impact, even if that job pays more. And that's what I hear you saying when you're talking about you have to get over the hump of the pre-grad school where everything is a little bit where you have a lot of courses that aren't teaching you to be a doctor or a professional. Not to say those aren't useful, but not everyone's passion is in those directions. Then you get into the actual thing. You're the doctor, you're the nurse, you're the physical therapist, and whatever it is. This is what I was waiting for. This is what I wanted to do, and now I'm interested because this is the thing I wanted to learn all along.
Yeah. You have to have a purpose to have motivation.
And physical therapists are all ripped to shreds. So how much do you lift?
I can do a pull-up with 80 pounds on my back. I can do one on push-ups.
Oh yeah, that's not impressive. That's oh my goodness. So 80 pounds on your back, not even tied around your waist. Because I've seen people do the plates with a weight belt, but you're talking about something like a backpack.
I don't have a weight belt, so yeah.
The leverage on that must be insane. Like, it's pulling down your shoulders. Like, how do your back muscles... I'm not going to ask about all the details, but that is very impressive. So for somebody that's struggling to gain weight or gain strength, they're in the gym, but they don't have the same kind of consistency, that traction that you've got in one direction, what would you advise them to do? Say, I told you, I've been training, I've gained some muscle, but I've started to plateau. Give me a 12-month plan that will help me gain 10 to 15 pounds of muscle mass. How much weight I should be lifting, how many reps, how often, how many hours a week, and what kind of nutrition I should be taking in.
Okay, I'll do my best here, because I'll say this. Fitness, exercise, nutrition is it's two sides of a coin. It's both simple and infinitely complex. The trick is finding the balance between the two. People usually fall on the side of not having enough information or having so much information and trying to perfect things that they kind of lose sight of what's actually needed to be focused on. So what I would say is the biggest thing is knowing some main principles. So there's the principle of progressive overload. That is probably, if you can sum it down to one thing being the most important, that is the most important. If you stay consistent and you consistently increase the volume, the weight, the amount of time you're putting into exercising, you will make progress. Regardless of how much you increase it, how quickly you increase it, or how long it takes, as long as you are consistently increasing some parameter, you will make progress. And that is the biggest thing. Because I can go on and on and on about ways to optimize things, but then you'll go to the gym and see someone with horrible form, horrible methodology, who's twice as big as you, completely shredded. And why is that? Well, you could chalk it up to genetics, and there might be some role in that, but it's essentially because they worked really hard for a long time. And if you keep pushing forward for a long time, you make progress. That's the biggest thing. The other biggest thing I would say is the principle of variability, because you were talking about a plateau. That's where that comes in, because the body doesn't like to improve. It likes to maintain homeostasis. It likes to stay where it's at. So if you don't change anything, if you're just increasing the weight every week or so, and you just keep going up, and eventually you stop, sure, eventually you might gain a little bit of strength and might start to break through that plateau, but it's going to be really tough. If you've gone like 3 weeks and you haven't increased at all, or you've regressed, that's maybe when you're starting to hit a plateau and it's time to change things. So there's a lot of things that you can change. So in the most simplest form, what I would say the best way to work out for general hypertrophy, muscle building, and strength is work in about the 8 to 12 rep range, that general range. Once you start hitting a plateau for like more than 2 weeks, that's when you would want to kind of change your range. But basic format that I like to give people that is the most simple and pretty reliable, doesn't require you to think about it a lot, is find a weight that challenges you for 8 to 12 reps for each exercise for about 3 sets. 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps, resting as long as you feel like you need. Not that complicated. Say you're starting out and it's difficult for about 8 reps. Just keep doing that, and then when you get to that last set, if you can, try and push past what you did the last time. So if you did 8 reps and you're not quite done, you're like, okay, I can do one. I can do another one. Great, do that, and if you can, do another one. Next workout, move that to the beginning of your first set. So if you did like 8, 8, 8, and then you did like 8, 8, 9, next time you're going to do 9, 8, 8. And then you're still going to just try and push past it on the last set, the last rep of the last set every time. And then just keep kind of attacking it onto the front. Once you get to that higher rep range where you've added on enough reps to where the weight you were doing is not is challenging for about 12 reps instead of 8, then you increase the weight. Because generally, what they like to say is DFI. Duration, frequency, then intensity. So duration is the same thing as volume, number of reps, the length of time you're doing a set for. So first, increase the number of reps. Then you're going to try and do more frequently. If you're already not working out, you know, if you're working out 3 days a week, you might start working out more because that's going to benefit you more. And then lastly is actually intensity, because it's hard for your body to adapt to lifting a heavier weight. Especially in the beginning, it's better to go with like higher volume before you go to higher intensity.
That sounds like the opposite of how a lot of people are training in the gym. It concerns me a little bit when I see somebody step up to the squat rack and put 500 pounds on it, and they stand there for 20, 30 seconds like, is this going to fall on me if I pull it off the rack? And I think the one I was watching, he actually eventually walked away from it without trying to lift it off. And my heart was okay. It was still. What would you say the heaviest someone should lift in the gym to be safe?
So that's a good question. It depends on it depends. It depends on the lift, and it depends on your comfortability with it. But basically, the rule I would say is this. Especially with compound movements. So squat, bench press. The heaviest, in my opinion, you should ever lift without a spotter is you should never be doing a weight so high that you're not absolutely confident you can do it for at least 3 reps with correct form. Because if you can't control the weight, it's not a safe exercise anymore. Squats can be one of the best exercises for preserving back and knee health for a very long time. Or you can screw up your back and your knees in one lift for the rest of your life. So you have to think about, which do you want? Do you want to risk that and lift a heavier weight for one time in your life? Or do you want to actually get benefit from the exercise? So generally, you can, it depends, but I would say try to avoid going, if you can't comfortably lift the weight with good control for at least 3 reps, and you're afraid going into the lift, it's not the best idea.
I'm going to trace back to something you said earlier. You were talking about having ADHD.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell?
No, you're fine, but I was going to ask you, do you think that lifting weights or any kind of exercise helps you stay focused?
I hadn't thought about that. It's probably a good neuroscience question. But, I mean, the one thing I can speak to is exercise helps every single thing in your body. It does not negatively affect a single thing. That is one thing that I have learned over the course of PT school. It helps every system work better. That includes the nervous system. So you get brain fog when you're not moving. Everything starts to shut down when you're not moving. So yeah, I would say exercising definitely helps overall the nervous system to function better and you think better. So probably, yeah.
I had a friend in college, very brilliant, very type A, motivated, charismatic. He told me that he had ADHD when he was a kid. I guess technically you still have it as an adult, but I'm not a psychologist. So his theory was it all got beat out of him when he was on the farm because he was working so hard. He said in school he had all kinds of problems. He got into fights, had a lot of struggle keeping up. And he said, I think that's what a lot of people that struggle in a traditional school setting really need, is to be out working somewhere physical, doing manual labor, something that helps their mind and their body work together, because we're made to move. I think the research that's been done on how the mind and body connect lets us know that, I mean, the brain is very focused on movement, and we're not really designed to be doing, I mean, this all day, sitting in a chair, typing at a laptop, whatever it is. That it's interesting you talk about that brain fog. I wonder what the research shows on if there's been any studies that directly focus on cognition, ability to problem solve, and the amount of physical activity people are doing.
That's a good question. That makes me think. So that's a complicated subject and one that I would love to do more research on. But one thing that I can speak to that's interesting is Your brain uses neurotransmitters to communicate in different areas of the nervous system. It also uses some of those same neurotransmitters, such as acetylcholine, to produce movement in your muscles. What you see consistently with ADHD, like, you think about ADHD visually, what do you always picture? You always picture someone, like, fidgeting, bouncing their leg up and down. That's their brain trying to get something moving, basically. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense if you follow that train of thought that if you can't get those neurotransmitters to fully flesh out those pathways that you want to be able to think properly, some of those same neurotransmitters are used to move muscles and move your body around. If you're using, it's much easier to just move your body than it is to complete a thought process if you have ADHD. So if you can get those neurotransmitters flowing, it kind of stands to reason that it might help use that same neurotransmitter to form some of those like neural pathways to help you think better.
Do you have any strategies that you use to help you focus?
Yeah, so I've tried like every strategy under the sun going through college, and not much worked for me. Some things worked for a little bit and then not for a while, but not after a while. But I have found a lot of things that help me during PT school. I'm kind of blanking on the name right now, but there's one like really famous technique where you basically do it kind of in sets. Do 25 minutes of studying, take a 5-minute break where you're just not thinking about it all, try and get as much as you can done in 25 minutes, and then switch back to that. I've tried that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it works great for people. But the problem is, if something is exhausting, sometimes it's very hard to just keep going, even if you set a schedule like that. And especially if you break from it at all, take a longer break than you intended to, you lose your motivation, and that kills it. The best way I've found recently that I really like and has consistently helped me stay focused is lowering the mental effort. So basically, I have a set of stuff that I need to study. Say I need to study 60 slides, and I got very little time to do it. The first thing I do is I think, why is this intimidating? Because I need to learn 60 slides of information in a very short amount of time. That's a big task. So first thing I do is break it down. Okay, I'm just going to read through this. I'm going to try and understand it on a basic level. Once I get to the point where this basically clicks, even if I can't explain it or say the exact details of it, if this stops confusing me a little bit, I move on. I just keep going, and that allows you to go really fast. You can just kind of read through it. And as I go through, I'll mark things that like, oh, that seems like an important concept. I see it coming back up over and over and over. I'll mark it. If it's also something that's like, okay, that's a really difficult concept and I don't get it right now, I could maybe get it if I stare at it for like 30 minutes, 20 minutes. It's not worth it right now. I'm going to mark it and I can come back to it. And what I've found is consistently in every single class that I do this, without fail, the second time I come back through, it is always so much easier. Even if I feel like I didn't actually learn much or memorize anything or like take the time to properly learn something, just reading through and trying to get a basic understanding, that adds context. And context, or the lack of context, is what actually makes things difficult to learn. Half of the time, the reason you can't understand something on a first pass is you didn't even understand the words that they were saying. That happened with like neuroscience, for example. There's a lot of words in neuroscience that I've never heard before, and I like words, but I've never heard them before. So nothing that was said made any sense. And I could stare at the page for ages, but it didn't make sense. But once I started to understand what those words meant and actually look at the definitions and figure out what was being said, I was like, this is actually very simple in concept. Context matters so much, and until you get that, you're going to expend so much mental energy trying to understand something that no matter what technique you use, it might work, but it's still going to be more exhausting. And this is the only way that I found to study as long as I have, because I used to get exhausted after studying for an hour. And now I study for like 10 plus hours a day. And it's not exhausting, it's fun, because things make sense in context. And you can kind of like build momentum by doing that.
10 plus hours a day.
During finals week, yeah.
Every day of the week.
Sometimes. Depends. Getting toward finals week, yeah. 100%.
That answers the question about how many hours a week. And that's finals week, but I imagine it's taxing all the time. I was going to ask you, with all the rigorousness, is that a word? Rigors of physical therapy school, what would you say the percentage of the population of physical therapy students are? You don't have to give me all the details, but when you get into a field like that, you know that you're going to be competing with the best of the best. Or not competing per se, but you competed with them to get in there. And when you get in there, there's going to be some people that are insanely intelligent, IQ 160, 180, higher than Einstein, potentially. And there's going to be people that came in and maybe they're not that gifted, but they come from a disadvantaged background. What, how did it make you feel encountering those different kinds of people? Did you feel intimidated by anyone that might have been smarter, or was there ever a feeling of imposter syndrome coming in?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Definitely, at times, had an imposter syndrome, especially like first starting out. First couple of weeks, my thought process was there are so many stupidly smart people here, and I don't think I can accomplish this. But I mean, the fact is, most people make it through this program that are in this program, so it should be possible. We'll see if I fail the first exam, but we'll see what happens. But basically, you're right. I met a lot of different types of people. I have friends who I wouldn't necessarily say are like the most insanely smart people I've ever met, who can just look at something and just get it like that. But they work so stupidly hard all the time. And I like I've studied like 10 plus hours a day, and they study more than that. And they work so stupidly hard at it, and they've done it for so long, and they're so good at putting in that consistent effort. That's like, okay, I don't have to wonder why you're here. You have earned your place by every sense of the word. And then there's other people that it's like, he really doesn't seem to put in any amount of work. I wonder what's going on there. And then I later kind of find out, oh, he has an eidetic memory. He retains 90% of what he hears in class and doesn't even have to study, really. That's cool. So then there's me. It's like, I'm not really either one of those things. So the cool thing that I've learned is, like, this is why it's fun to study with people sometimes, is you learn things about how to learn from different people. Because if there's one thing that I found that's consistent or inconsistent, depending on how you look at it, everybody has their own unique way of learning everything. Everybody learns learns things in a slightly different way. You can group styles of learning, but everybody has a slightly different way to learn, and that's really cool. I think that's something that's really cool about what makes us unique as people. But I have gotten a lot of my ability to study long hours from the people I study with, and seeing their constant drive to work hard. I've also gotten things from people who are like smarter than me, looking at how they do things and being like, maybe I should try something like that to make my work more efficient. So you can really take things from different places to make your own learning style and enhance it and find out what works for you well. Because although everyone learns in a slightly different way, everyone you meet has something to offer you, and that works well for learning as well. You can look at how they study and get something out of that and think, I can apply that to how I learn as well, and it can help me improve.
In the context of people that may not believe they should be there, the imposter syndrome, I'd like to go back to what we were talking about before about genetics and the limitations of genetics. There's people that would like to be in shape. They'd like to get into fitness. They'd like to lose weight. But for whatever reason, they're maybe 100 pounds more than they would like to be. And they will eat nothing but chicken and broccoli for weeks. And they step on the scale, it reads the same. What would be your explanation for something like that? And what would you say to that person that's discouraged from having no results despite a big life change like that?
Genetics plays a role in a lot of stuff. The tricky part is saying how much of a role. And it's my belief that for most things, nurture is more of a significance than nature.
Really?
I would say so. You can overcome a lot with hard work, and a big part of it is just accepting that you may be disadvantaged and sucking it up, I guess. Because there's always going to be somebody who is more genetically gifted than you, but that should never be an excuse for you to not try. Because you'll never know what potential you can achieve if you just submit to the fact that somebody else is more gifted than you are and then do nothing with what you have. But that is an interesting point that you bring up about someone in that situation, because I think a lot of people, especially in Western society, in the developed world, find themselves in that circumstance, and that there is actually a very good reason for that, and it's not something that's super heavily talked about. It's something called metabolic syndrome. To kind of briefly define what that is, metabolic syndrome is technically when you have 3 or more of, you have high blood pressure, hyperglycemia, so usually these individuals have type 2 diabetes or are on their way to it, Dyslipidemia, so cholesterol issues. So this is heavily linked to cardiovascular issues. Low HDL, and the last thing is like being in the 90th percentile of waist girth for your age, height, and sex. Basically, what all this leads to, though, is a really interesting phenomenon where you're on your way to, or you're at diabetes, like close to diabetes because you're overweight. You have insulin resistance going on. You also have something that's not heavily talked about, though, is it's related to your mitochondria and your ability to produce energy.
What are mitochondria?
Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. It produces energy. It's the little cellular it's this little cellular component that helps produce energy. And without it, you can't produce energy. You will not have energy.
So in the case of metabolic syndrome, there's dysfunction with mitochondria that prevents our cells from producing energy the way they should be able to.
Yes, essentially. So the basic idea, so the reason I want to say this is that this is a very complex thing, and I don't claim to be an expert on it by any means. But there are a lot of studies out there that are very good on this that you should go and read. But it is based on, what I'm going to say is based on this principle that I do know to be true. It doesn't take very long to look at any kind of study of biology, physiology, pathophysiology, whatever, that there is a consistent thing that goes on in the body where if you don't use it, you lose it. And that applies to everything. It applies to the receptors for your neurotransmitters. It applies to your muscle, your tendons, your bone. You don't use it, it gets weaker. That's the way that the body does it, like everything. So what happens is, if you are overweight, there's a lot of factors coming into this, but if you especially don't move around at all, your body loses its ability to use fats as fuel. That's where it relates to mitochondria. It's not that your mitochondria don't produce energy. They don't function in a way where they can use your body's own fat stores, your own fuel stores, to produce energy. So what happens is, I used to think this was crazy, but now kind of seeing how this works, it makes more sense, where people say, I only ate salads for like a couple of weeks, and I ran every day, and I didn't see the scale move an inch. I was like, well, that doesn't make sense, because, if you're spending more energy than you're taking in, you should be losing weight. That's, by definition, is how it should work. But that's not the whole picture, especially with people who have metabolic syndrome, because if your body can't physically break down fats to use as fuel, you cannot lose fat. It's not possible. But the thing that people don't know, and this is what I would say for advice, is get moving, because if you use it, your body regains a lot of ability to use things again. Specifically relating to the mitochondria, what happens is, although you might not see the scale move because your body can't burn fats as fuel anymore, you can, and studies have shown that your ATP, which is your energy production, your mitochondrial activity, and your breakdown of fats starts to increase in ability. You start to restore that metabolic ability. And you see that before you start to see breakdown of fats, because your body has to regain the ability to use fuel before it can actually burn it. So before you see the scale move, you can make progress that you're not seeing. So what it takes is consistency for a longer period of time. So it doesn't have to be just cutting everything out of your diet and going on, because I can't live 6 days a week eating only salads and working out every single day. I don't have the energy for that. But if you move consistently, if you consistently do activity and consistently do exercises, eventually you are going to see that scale start to drop, because your body is going to regain its ability to use fats as fuel.
So is it plausible to say that somebody that's standing on that scale week after week, if they continue to exercise and do all the right things long enough, they're eventually going to start to see progress, and when they do, that progress is going to start to move and maybe snowball a little bit as their body regains some of the normal functions of producing energy and converting fats into energy?
That is very true. It's just, that's why it's so hard, because if you think about it, you're not getting energy from much of anywhere, so you're going to be exhausted and you're going to feel horrible for a while. So it's very hard to stay dedicated to that, but if you do, you will see progress.
You have to be committed and learn to trust the process without seeing results for a long time. Interesting.
That's a good way to put it. Trust the process.
Well, we have one final question for you, and on this podcast, we have the previous speaker, not knowing who the next speaker will be, ask a question, and I will be giving you that question. The question that has been left for you is, What is God doing in your life right now?
That's a good question. Right now, I'm kind of in a season where God has just been showing me the answers to prayer that other people have been praying for me for a long time, and for all the people who've been pouring into me. I want to get to a place where I'm more focused on other people and focused on my relationship with God. But right now, what I'm definitely most of what I've been focusing on is just being thankful for everything that God has done, because this is not the place that I thought I would be a couple of years ago, and it's something I do every single day that I can remember, especially before I take an exam. I always just stop being stressed and think, I am so blessed to be here. I should not be here. Thank you, God, for bringing me here, and thank you for everything that you've done through everyone in my life to bring me to this point, because I am so incredibly blessed just to sit in this chair. It doesn't matter what I get on this exam. It doesn't matter what happens today or tomorrow. I am incredibly blessed to be here, and I just am insanely thankful for what you have done to put me here.
That is so powerful, to be thankful for where you are. And no matter how hard the day is, that was one thing that's gotten me through some stuff as well. The thought of, hey, I could quit, I could be out of here, but then I would be waking up every morning having failed. But now I wake up every morning, it's hard, but I'm still in it. And just being thankful to have survived one more day, or just be thankful to enjoy one more day, depending on where you are. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, I thank you for your time. It's been wonderful having you on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It was great.
All right.